Chapter 1856. Not bad, not bad. He patted Song Ming's shoulder in relief. Since you've already entered the mid-nascent soul stage, you can take your time. He was very happy to see that his disciple had such a promising future. Now that he had such a cultivation, he believed that in a few years, his strength would increase even more. Song Ming smiled, but in his heart, he wondered how Duan Yi and the others were doing now. After sending off his master and the people who came to congratulate him, he summoned the shadow guard beside him. Master. A man dressed in black appeared beside him. Song Ming glanced at that person, then asked, "What's the news recently?" Thus, the shadow guard handed over a stack of information to him. "These are the things that master asked me to pay attention to." Song Ming took it and looked through it. His brows furrowed slightly, and he only put it away after he finished reading all the information. "If there's any news about Fengjiu, immediately send it to me." "Yes." The shadow guard replied, then left in a flash. Song Ming stood with his hands behind his back, looked at the sky, and muttered, "I didn't expect so many things to happen. However, if it's her, I'll just treat it as an experience. I didn't expect Duan Yi and the others to have also entered the nascent soul stage." Thinking of this, the corners of his lips curled up, and a smile appeared on his face. Among the information, there was also news about the Phoenix Star. From knowing Fengjiu to being acquainted with her, they naturally knew who this Phoenix Star referred to. However, what they didn't expect was that the Heavenly Sun Immortal sect seemed to have mistaken a female disciple of their sect as the Phoenix Star. This way, the hidden forces wouldn't target Fengjiu, and she would be safer. However, he didn't know where she was after not seeing her for so long. Thinking of that woman who made people sigh in admiration, the smile on his face deepened. There would be a chance to meet her again. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. At this time, Xianyuan Mos of the Xianyuan Empire had already brought people to the upper reaches of the continent after his father came out of seclusion. During these 3 months, Mo Chen waited for Fengjiu at the Naylan residence. However, day after day passed, there was still no news of her. Even Leng Shuang and Leng Hua were quickly developing their forces in secret under Mo Chen's arrangements. At the same time, they also inquired about their master's whereabouts. However, there was still no news at all. "Why hasn't master contacted us?" Luo Yu asked Du Fan and the others worriedly. He looked at them and saw that they were all busy with their own things. He then asked again, "Do you guys think that master? Did something happen to him?" As soon as he said this, a few people's gazes. "What are you talking about? Who is master? How could something happen to him? I think there must be something holding master back, so he didn't contact us. Not bad. Let's take care of things and wait for master to come back. When master appears, she will definitely look for us." Hearing their words, Du Fan smiled and nodded. "Yes, I think so too. We don't have to worry about master. I think something must have happened to her, or she can't contact us. However, her safety shouldn't be a problem. Have you forgotten that she still has a few contracted beasts by her side?" Chapter 1857. When they heard this, they looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. The Yama Lord had come as well. This was a good thing for them. However, they had no idea where their master was right now. At the same time, Fengjiu, who they were thinking about, was with a group of people as they went through their final training. The venomous Black Forest was their final training ground. The Spectral Elder and the others had left after sending them to the forest. They weren't afraid that they would escape at all because the heart-eroding pills they had ingested had completely taken effect. At this moment, they were all people who only knew how to listen to orders. However, the Spectral Elder and the others who were waiting for them to return from their training didn't know that 123 people in black robes and black masks were seated together in the venomous Black Forest that the people from the Temple of Darkness couldn't control. Fengjiu's group originally only had 70 or 80 people, but later on, the 30 or 40 people that the Spectral Elder had spared were added to Fengjiu's group because of their outstanding performance. They went through training together, and that was exactly why there were 123 people today. At this moment, these people who had lost their minds and only knew how to listen to orders in the eyes of the Spectral Elder and the others from the Temple of Darkness were all looking at the young man in black robes with admiration. None of the people here could forget that it was because of him that they weren't reduced to killing tools. It was because of him that the poison in their bodies could be cured. It was because of him that they had the right to choose another path. With the help of this black fog poisonous forest, the poison in your bodies has been cured. The time to train here is up. If any of you want to leave, you can take this opportunity to leave. The Dark Knight Temple won't be able to track your whereabouts." Fengjiu's voice rang out unhurriedly. He swept his gaze past everyone and memorized every single one of their appearances. Everyone looked at each other when they heard that. In the end, they said in unison, "Captain, we want to follow you. We'll go wherever you go." After going through fire and water for a few months, they had already decided that as long as they could survive, they would definitely follow by their captain's side. Not only was he their captain, but he was also the one who saved them and gave them a new lease of life. Those who could sit here alive were all men who valued friendship. Naturally, they wouldn't leave because of this. Hearing this, Fengjiu's eyes flickered. "I'm going to deal with the Temple of Darkness. Do you want to follow me and become enemies with the Temple of Darkness?" Hearing this, everyone was shocked. They didn't expect the captain to want to attack the Temple of Darkness. However, they weren't afraid of death. Hearing this, they all stood up. "We will listen to Captain Yu. Climb a mountain of swords or dive into a sea of fire, I will not hesitate." His voice, which was filled with vigor and determination, rang out clearly in the forest and echoed in everyone's ears. Hearing this, Fengjiu finally smiled. "Very good. Although the training has been brought forward and we only have 3 months, none of you have disappointed me. Since you are all willing to follow me, then I will lend you a helping hand." Chapter 1858. Looking at the pill bottle, everyone was stunned and stared at the bottle in his hand. They had been taking pills recently and their strength had increased step by step because the people of the Temple of Darkness had given them pills to advance. Now, seeing the leader take out the pill bottle, they were a little surprised. The pills given by the Temple of Darkness had been used up. Where did he get these from? Fengjiu waved his hand and pills flew out and landed in front of them. "Eat this. It can increase your strength again. However, after taking this pill, don't take any more pills for advancement for the next 1 or 2 years." Hearing this, everyone took the pills without hesitation and swallowed them. As they swallowed the pills, the spiritual energy in their bodies surged. After a short moment of astonishment, everyone quickly sat down cross-legged. Seeing this, Fengjiu smiled and walked a distance away to protect them. During this time of cultivation, most people's strength was around the middle stage of the nascent soul stage. Only a few people were at the early stage of the nascent soul stage. After taking Feng Jiunan's elixir, the early stage of the nascent soul stage cultivators jumped to the peak stage of the nascent soul stage, and those who were originally in the middle stage of the nascent soul stage directly broke through and entered the flying immortal stage. Among them, Lei Xiao and a few others were at the mid-nascent soul stage. The others were at the early nascent soul stage. Because of their advancement, the sky was filled with continuous thunder, which surprised the few demonic cultivators of the Temple of Darkness who were hiding outside the forest. "There seems to be something wrong with the thunder. Let's go in and take a look," a flying immortal stage cultivator said to the 2 people beside him. The 3 of them went into the black fog poisonous forest together. They didn't follow those people who had entered the forest to train. Only a few of them stayed outside the forest and paid attention to the movements. Now, they suddenly heard the rumbling sound of heavenly thunder striking down from the sky. It was really a little abnormal. Following the place where the thunder fell, the closer they got, the more shocked they were. As soon as the first bolt of lightning struck down, another bolt of lightning struck down as well. Bolts of lightning spread out on the ground, and visible ripples formed by the airflow spread out. The powerful pressure and aura were shocking to behold. "Hiss!" The leader of the flying immortal stage cultivators gasped. Looking at the powerful pressure and aura in the forest, he exclaimed, "How can it be so powerful? I'm afraid there's more than 1 or 2 flying immortal stage cultivators." They sped up and moved forward. The closer they got, the more shocked they became. Until they saw a black figure standing beside a tree, playing with a mask in his hand. 100 meters behind him, a group of cultivators in black robes sat cross-legged to advance. Seeing this, they immediately stepped forward and came before the black-clothed young man. "What's going on here? How can they advance by advancement?" The black-robed youth, who was Fengjiu, looked at the fairy realm cultivator in front of her. His eyes were wide open, and he looked at the scene behind her in shock. Fengjiu's eyes flashed, and she paused for a moment before saying, "They are breaking through." Chapter 1859. "It's because they just took the elixir," Fengjiu said as his gaze swept past the 3 of them. "What do you mean?" The fairy realm cultivator furrowed his brows. In the next moment, he saw the young man in front of him curl his lips into a devilish smile as he spoke in a cold voice. "That's exactly what it means." As soon as Fengjiu finished speaking, he instantly attacked. A cold light flashed through his sleeves as a sharp dagger flew towards the fairy realm cultivator at a speed that was too fast for anyone to cover their ears with their hands. The fairy realm cultivator was shocked as he immediately leaned back to avoid the dagger that was about to slash his throat. After he took a few steps back in shock, he saw the black-robed young man's strange movement technique flash past. The dagger in his hand turned and slashed at the two nascent soul realm cultivators who had yet to react. The two nascent soul realm cultivators groaned as they fell to the ground with their eyes wide open. They didn't even have time to react. Seeing that the black-robed young man had killed two nascent soul realm cultivators, the fairy realm cultivator took a step back defensively. Number 9. What are you doing? Are you trying to rebel? Fengjiu curled the corners of his lips and didn't reply to him. He only stared at him. In the next moment, the black figure flashed once again. Her movement technique was extremely fast, and her attacks were swift and fierce with killing intent. Even the fairy realm cultivator couldn't help but be shocked at this moment. Just as he was about to retaliate, his face turned pale with a whoosh. A strong force of pressure attacked him, and the shock that came from his soul caused his body to stiffen. It was as if he was being controlled by someone. He wanted to move and shout, but he couldn't do it. Whoosh! The swift and fierce blade energy slashed past, and the fairy realm cultivator groaned. His eyes widened in disbelief as his body stiffened and fell to the ground. Bang! His entire body fell to the ground as he stared at Fengjiu, as if he was asking why. Fengjiu glanced at the 3 corpses on the ground and took the cosmos bags from their waists. Then, he condensed a flame in his palm and burned the 3 corpses. A day later, when everyone had completed their breakthroughs, they all stood in front of Fengjiu with unconcealable excitement on their faces. Even though they had a lot of questions in their hearts, they didn't ask. They just looked at him with unconcealable excitement in their eyes. After interacting with him for so long, they already knew that their captain was extraordinary. But how deep was his depth? All this time, no one had been able to figure it out. Now that he had revealed such a move again, it really shocked them to the core. After all, even the advancement elixirs that the Temple of the Dark Knight had given them were not as good as the elixirs that the captain had given them yesterday. Furthermore, the captain had given them so many elixirs without even blinking an eye. Furthermore, after taking the elixirs, only a few of the 123 people were at the peak of the nascent soul stage, while the rest had already become cultivators at the fairy realm. There was a huge difference in strength between each stage. Now that they stood out, even the Temple of the Dark Knight would have to be wary of them. Even among the clans outside, there wasn't a single clan that had so many fairy realm cultivators. Fengjiu looked at everyone and nodded in satisfaction when he saw their current strength and cultivation. He smiled and said, "Not bad, very good. Next, I'll tell you about the arrangements after we return." Chapter 1860. Once we leave this place, the most important thing is to remember not to be discovered. Once you've figured out their strengths, deal with them first. After that, don't stay behind and leave. She paused and looked at them. "Remember, I want everyone to leave this place alive." Everyone's hearts warmed as they nodded. "Yes, Captain. We'll definitely leave this place alive. Let's go. If anything unexpected happens after we return, act according to my orders." With that, she led them out of the forest. 2 days later, when Fengjiu and the others stood in the plaza once more with their masks on, even the spectral elder could not help but be stunned. He looked at the 100 or so people in front of him in disbelief. "Take off your masks," the spectral elder called out as he stared at the 100 or so people. When he saw them take off their masks one by one like puppets and reveal their appearances, the spectral elder could not help but widen his eyes as his heart trembled. How was this possible? In the short span of 3 months, these people had all become fairy realm cultivators, and only a few of them were nascent soul realm cultivators. Could it be that after taking the advancement elixir, their advancement was really that great? Ghost, spectral elder, how did they advance so quickly? The fairy realm cultivators and nascent soul cultivators to the side all widened their eyes in shock. They stared at the group of people as if they had seen ghosts. How could they possess such strength in just 3 short months? If it were not for the fact that they were standing right in front of them, they would not have dared to believe that this was real. 123 people, and there are actually only a few nascent soul cultivators among them. This is too inconceivable, too inconceivable. The spectral elder stared at the group, and his gaze paused on Fengjiu in front of him. This youth with number 9 had actually become a nascent soul cultivator in such a short amount of time. He was truly not simple. When he thought about how these people were groomed by him, and how they all obeyed his orders, his heart burned with passion. There were more than 100 of them, and they had such strength. Even the headquarters of the Temple of Dark Knight would not be able to find so many fairy realm cultivators. If they took the advancement elixir, would their strength increase again, and they would directly leap to the next level? His heart was in a mess. In order to avoid being discovered by the people behind him, he took in a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Looking at the 100 or so people before him, he secretly made a decision. He wanted to take this powerful group for himself. He wanted to turn this team into his subordinates and not belong to the Temple of Darkness. However, they had obtained their current cultivation after consuming the advancement pill. What was their battle prowess? A dark light flashed through his eyes, and he said, "Number 1, number 9, number 13, number 45, number 78, step forward." As soon as he spoke, 5 people walked out from the group in front of him. Because they had taken off their masks, it could be seen that the 5 of them did not have any expression on their faces as they coldly looked ahead. The Ghost Elder was very satisfied when he saw the few people that walked out as soon as he spoke. He nodded slightly, and then he suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at the few Immortal Realm experts and Nascent Soul Realm Devil cultivators that stood at the side, and his voice suddenly became cold. "Kill them!" Chapter 1861. The expressions of those people changed drastically, and as they quickly retreated, a few of the Fairy Realm cultivators shouted at the Ghost Elder, "What are you doing?" However, as soon as they spoke, an attack came at them. The fierce attack was filled with killing intent, and it was merciless, causing them to be extremely shocked. Logically speaking, they had 4 flying Immortal Realm cultivators and 2 Nascent Soul Realm Devil cultivators, so they should not be afraid of those 5 people. However, the moment they attacked, they were shocked, especially when the black-clothed youth among the 5 people actually dared to attack one of their flying Immortal Realm cultivators. This kind of courage shocked them even more. Were they not afraid of death? Oh, that's right, they were trained as suicide soldiers, and all of them had consumed heart-eroding pills, so how could they be afraid of death? These people all obeyed the Ghost Elder's orders, and now that he had ordered these people to kill them, they probably wouldn't stop until they killed them. Swish! A gust of wind shot out from his palm, and the fierce sound of a blade of air could be heard. The Ghost Elder had his hands behind his back as he watched with narrowed eyes, and his gaze fell on the 9th black-clothed young man. That young man was only at the middle stage of the Nascent Soul Realm, while his opponent was at the initial stage of the Fairy Realm. There was a difference of 1 stage between their strengths, but he was still able to rely on his extremely fast speed and unpredictable movement techniques to force the Fairy Realm cultivator to retreat step by step, causing him to be in an extremely sorry state. He couldn't dodge in time, and his sleeve was torn by the 9th black-clothed young man. His opponent's fingers had scratched his arm, and a few streaks of blood seeped out. He grunted, and a trace of killing intent flashed through his narrowed eyes. In the next moment, he moved his hand, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He poured spiritual energy into his palm, and a fierce current of air streaked across the blade of the sword. With a swish, a ray of sword energy shot out, and it attacked the black-clothed young man in front of him. Fengjiu's face was cold, and her expression couldn't be seen. When she saw the sword energy shooting towards her, she dodged to the side, but she didn't manage to dodge it completely. Instead, she pretended that she couldn't dodge it in time, and her arm was cut by the sword energy, causing blood to seep out. At the same time, as she charged forward, a dagger from her sleeve fell into her hand, and the moment the Fairy Realm cultivator turned around, the dagger in her hand fiercely slashed his throat. Swish! His movements were as smooth as flowing water, and his attacks were clean and efficient. He was so fast that people couldn't help but secretly praise him. Good movement technique. When he saw this scene, Senior Ghost's eyes narrowed and he nodded to himself. At the same time that he was slightly surprised, he was also very satisfied. Who would have thought that this brat could actually kill someone above his level? His potential was truly limitless. What was different from Elder Ghost was that although the people standing behind him all watched expressionlessly, when they saw that their captain was injured, their hearts still rose slightly. Fortunately, in the next moment, they saw that person being killed. Now that he thought about it, wouldn't it be strange if the captain was able to kill a Fairy Realm cultivator with the strength of a Nascent Soul Stage cultivator without sustaining any injuries? He had dodged that attack very well. It wouldn't hurt his vitals, and it wouldn't arouse anyone's suspicions. At least, that Elder Ghost wouldn't have thought that it was their captain's intention. The others were the same as well. They attacked ruthlessly and directly at the vital points. This was the result of their recent training. They had to specifically attack the vital points of the enemy when they attacked. It was fine if they didn't attack, but once they attacked, they had to take the enemy's life. Chapter 1862. Elder Ghost chuckled as he looked at the people who were being forced to retreat. How could that be? This is also training. I believe that if the higher-ups knew about this, they would definitely agree. The people looked at him, then looked at the 100 or so people who were standing still, as well as the people who were attacking them. A thought flashed through their minds. I know. You saw that these spies were extremely outstanding, so you wanted to take them for yourself. Once this was said, the people were shocked. They knew that it wouldn't be easy for them to leave this place alive today, so they immediately took out their magic tools to fight. However, their reactions were too slow. Number 1 and the others' attacks were fierce, and they didn't want them to leave alive at all. Whoosh! Bang! Sword energy swept past, and a nascent soul cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood before being sent flying. He fell to the ground and twitched for a while before dying. Bang! Number 1 struck out with his palm, sending a fairy realm cultivator flying. At the same time, the sharp sword in his hand chased after the fairy realm cultivator. Whoosh! With a whoosh, the sword pierced the fairy realm cultivator's heart. When the sword was pulled out, blood splattered all over the ground, and the smell of blood spread through the air. Not long after, the people died one by one at their hands. Only when the last person fell did Fengjiu and the others put away their weapons and stand in a line in front of Elder Ghost. Elder Ghost, they've been killed. The mission is complete. Fengjiu's voice was cold as he spoke respectfully. When Elder Ghost saw this, he couldn't hide the excitement in his eyes. Good. Very good. I've never brought a group of spies who are as outstanding as you. The survival rate is high, and every one of you is an existence that can take on 10 people. Very good. Ha 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 ha. He raised his head and laughed loudly. Looking at the 123 people in front of him, he was extremely excited. With this group of people, it would be more than enough for him to rebel against the Temple of Darkness and establish his own sect. Go back and rest. I'll give you your missions tomorrow. He waved his hand and watched them leave with satisfaction. When they returned to their bunks, some of them fell back a few steps and stayed outside, while the others surrounded Fengjiu. Captain, are you all right? The wound on your hand needs to be treated quickly. Fengjiu waved his hand and smiled. It's nothing. It's just a flesh wound. As he spoke, he sprinkled some medicine on the wound and simply bandaged it. Captain, that ghost elder wants to take our team for himself, right? He's got guts. It's not courage, it's ambition. I think he wants to establish his own sect. But that's true. All of us have the strength of the fairy realm. This kind of strength is already very strong in the outside world. It's not strange for him to have such thoughts. Fengjiu raised her hand and said, it's best to be careful here. Don't talk about it for now. Let's go back and rest. We'll see what mission he's going to give us tomorrow before we decide what to do. Yes. Hearing his words, everyone responded and dispersed. The next morning, everyone stood side by side in the plaza. In just a night's time, the people standing here today discovered that apart from the 100 or so people, the number of devil cultivators who were originally guarding here seemed to have decreased by a lot. They guessed that it might be because of Elder Ghost's actions. They thought to themselves, what kind of mission will Elder Ghost give us today? Chapter 1863. The two seductive women followed behind the spectral elder. At this moment, they couldn't help but raise their heads and size up the 123 black-clothed spies in front of them. Were these people the spies of a fairy realm cultivator who had only used 3 months to become a fairy realm cultivator? Greetings, spectral elder. Everyone bowed respectfully, and their loud voices rang out in the square. Elder Gue replied. His sharp gaze swept across the people in front of him. Only then did he open his mouth. You're all spies that have passed the training. Originally, you needed a year's time. However, to have such strength in just 3 months, you've truly surprised me. Now, I'll arrange the first mission for you. Just as the spectral elder was about to give them their missions, his eyebrows suddenly twitched. His gaze swept past the crowd and landed on the forest outside the square. Perhaps he had sensed something, and his expression changed slightly. Fengjiu caught a glimpse of a ray of light from the corner of his eye. Furthermore, there were ripples of spiritual energy, and that was where the transportation formation was. It seemed that someone had come from the transportation formation. Indeed, after the spectral elder hurriedly left behind a few words, he sent the 2 women behind him away and quickly walked towards the forest. When the spectral elder arrived at the formation and saw the people who had walked out, he couldn't help but step forward respectfully. This subordinate kowtows in salute to master. His heart trembled at this moment, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. He thought to himself, why did master come at this time? Why wasn't there any news of him coming? Could it be that he heard some news? At that moment, his body tensed up slightly, and his heartbeat sped up. His palms were covered in sweat. Although the Temple of the Dark Knight might not have hundreds of fairy realm cultivators, there were quite a number of cultivators who were above the fairy realm. This was especially true for the people who followed their master. Any one of them could easily destroy a town. If he were to find out that he was having second thoughts, he was afraid that. What? Are you afraid when you see me coming? The masked black-robed man narrowed his eyes and stared at the kneeling spectral elder. His sharp eyes seemed to be able to see through people's hearts. Hearing this, the spectral elder's heart sank, but he hurriedly said, "Forgive me, Master. Something happened here, and I didn't think that Master would suddenly come, so, what happened?" The masked man in black robes glanced at him and shifted his gaze away. His gaze landed on the people standing upright in that direction. "It's like this. The fairies and nascent soul cultivators here were all killed when they fought with the spies. I haven't reported this matter yet, as I was worried that Master would blame me." "Oh?" The black-robed man's voice was slightly raised as he walked forward. "Are they the spies I asked you to train? Wasn't it only for 3 months? How did he have the ability to kill the fairy realm cultivators under my command?" Chapter 1864. Hearing this, the black-robed man's eyes moved slightly, and a dark light flashed through his eyes. He walked up to the front and arrived before the 123 people. His gaze swept past them, and after sensing their strength and cultivation, he nodded to himself. "Well done." He glanced at Elder Ghost who followed behind him. "To be able to have such strength and cultivation in 3 months, I have to say that the talent of this group of spies is extremely good. This subordinate doesn't dare claim the credit. This is all because the higher-ups gave them pills and extremely good resources to nurture them. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to achieve such results in such a short period of time." Elder Ghost hurriedly said. "They've all taken the heart-eroding pill?" the black-robed man asked again. "Yes." Elder Ghost respectfully replied, and then he hurriedly said to the 123 people, "From now on, your master is this person before you. You must obey him absolutely and unconditionally. Pledge your loyalty to him to the death, and you won't hesitate to die 10,000 deaths. Greetings, Master." This subordinate pledges his loyalty to him to the death, and he won't hesitate to die 10,000 deaths. The 123 people respectfully knelt on one knee. Their voices were loud and clear as if they were swearing an oath, and it clearly echoed in the square. Hearing this, Elder Ghost's heart ached. No matter how many plans are made, the plans of the heavens can't compare. He originally wanted to take these 123 people for himself, but now, he could only hand over the people he'd trained for nothing. When the black-robed man saw this scene, he seemed to be very satisfied. He glanced at Elder Ghost, and then his gaze swept past the people in the first row. His low and cold voice carried a bit of playfulness. "Then let me see if you've truly passed the training." Hearing this, although the 123 people wore masks and were expressionless, their hearts still moved slightly. He wanted to see their strength? What did he want to do? Within the crowd, although Fengjiu's gaze didn't waver in the slightest like the others, when she saw the masked person before her and the people beside him, she still felt slightly surprised in her heart. If she remembered correctly, the masked man should be the man she saved in the medical center. After she entered the medical center, she smelled a rotten smell and saw the naked man wearing only a mask. If she had known that he was the master of the Temple of Darkness, she would have killed him. Unfortunately, not only had she not killed him, she had even saved his life. "You, come out." The black-robed man pointed his finger forward, and his gaze fell on Fengjiu. Seeing this, Fengjiu respectfully stepped forward and stood upright. "Use everything you have to kill him." The black-robed man extended his finger and pointed at Old Ghost. When Elder Ghost heard this, he was shocked and his eyes couldn't help but widen. "Master." "Yes." Fengjiu respectfully replied. In the next moment, he instantly attacked Elder Ghost. The dagger that shone with a cold light slashed through the air, heading straight for Elder Ghost's lifeline. Elder Ghost quickly retreated and looked at the black-robed man in shock. He seemed to be in disbelief and didn't understand why he would be treated like this. "Master, what did this subordinate do wrong?" Chapter 1865. Elder Ghost's heart trembled and his gaze narrowed. Master." Before he could finish speaking, he instantly retreated and took out a teleportation scroll, intending to escape. Seeing this, the black-robed man's eyes narrowed. Just as he was about to order the people behind him to intercept and kill him, he saw the black figure in front of him dash out with a sharp blade of air. Whoosh! Hiss! Ah! As the sharp blade of air streaked past, the dagger in Fengjiu's hand shot out with a whoosh, hitting one of the hands that held the teleportation scroll. Elder Ghost's hand was in pain, and he gasped as he cried out in pain. The teleportation scroll in his hand fell to the ground. Just as he was about to pick up the teleportation scroll, a sharp gust of wind from a palm attacked him. He was so shocked that he immediately retreated, not daring to stay. When he raised his eyes and saw that it was number 9, he couldn't help but grit his teeth. Damn it! He had really failed miserably at such an easy task. He had failed. A trace of surprise flashed through the eyes of the black-robed man and the 4 people behind him. They didn't expect that this masked spy would actually be able to force Elder Ghost, who was at the peak of the fairy realm, to retreat step by step with just the strength of a nascent soul. It seemed that this group of spies was truly outstanding. Their gazes descended onto the Ghost Elder and the spy. They noticed that the aura emanating from the spy was only at the nascent soul realm. Normally, a nascent soul realm cultivator wouldn't be a match for a cultivator at the peak of the flying immortal realm. However, the spy relied on his strange movement technique and extremely swift speed to firmly gain the upper hand. The spy's attacks were sharp and swift. Coupled with his unpredictable movement technique, speed and techniques made up for each other's shortcomings. When he attacked, he went straight for the vital points of a person's body. There were many times when Elder Ghost almost died at the spy's hands. Young master, this spy's techniques are very strange. His attacks are extremely fast, and his techniques are ruthless. He goes straight for the vital points. I reckon that before he was recruited by us, he should have some talent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to reach such a level of movement technique in 3 months. An old man standing behind the black-robed man spoke as he sized up the movements and techniques of the black-robed spy in front of him. This person is only at the nascent soul stage and yet he has such extraordinary strength. It is indeed rare. The black-robed man nodded his head as he spoke. He seemed to be very impressed. Because they saw that the black-clothed spy had the upper hand with his strange skills, they didn't make a move. It wasn't until Elder Ghost couldn't dodge in time that his throat was slit by the dagger in his panic that he fell to the ground. Yes. Blood flowed out of Elder Gue's mouth. His eyes trembled as he glared at number 9. Shock and astonishment filled his eyes. He moved his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he was unable to say anything and breathed his last. Aside from the dead Elder Ghost, no one knew what kind of terror he had suffered at the last moment of his life. Only when Ghost Elder breathed his last did Fengjiu retract his gaze, hiding the expression in his eyes. He held the dagger and walked forward, arriving in front of the black-robed man. "Master, the mission is complete, please accept." A middle-aged man quickly walked forward. After checking on the dead Elder Ghost, he returned behind the black-robed man and spoke in a low voice before standing properly. The black-robed man had a playful smile on his lips. His gaze carried a hint of interest as he stared at the black-clothed spy in front of him. Hearing the voice, he didn't seem to be very old. Chapter 1866. Hearing that, Fengjiu replied, "Yes." Then, she reached out and took off the mask on her face, revealing the handsome face behind the mask. Her current appearance was disguised. Unless it was someone very familiar with her, no one would be able to recognize her. This man was still unconscious when she saved him last time. The people around him had probably long forgotten about her. After all, she was just a person they met on the road. Who would remember her? The black-robed man looked at the face in front of him and was a little surprised by the youth and good complexion under the mask. This young man looked to be less than 20 years old. His skin was white and his facial features were not extremely outstanding. However, he was still handsome and very harmonious. Because of the consumption of the heart-eroding pill, these people almost instinctively obeyed orders and would not resist. This was the most suitable point to keep people around because people who consumed the heart-eroding pill did not have to worry about betrayal at all. The black-robed man glanced at the waist tag of the young man in front of him and took a look. "Number 9? "Yes," Fengjiu replied. "Among the 123 of you, who is the leader?" The black-robed man played with the waist tag engraved with number 9 in his hand and swept his gaze across the people in front of him. Finally, his eyes fell on one person. In his opinion, this person was the strongest among these people. Now, in terms of the leader, it should be this person. However, just when he thought there was no mistake, he heard number 9 in front of him speak. "Master. This subordinate is the leader," Fengjiu said, but cursed in her heart. Usually, others called her master. After mixing in here, she had always been the one to call others master. Especially this person was an enemy. It was really sullen. "You?" The black-robed man was slightly surprised and asked with a playful smile, "You can be their leader with the strength of a nascent soul? Are they convinced?" This subordinate obeys the order. In other words, they were all following orders. There was nothing to be convinced about. Hearing this, the black-robed man's lips curled up slightly and nodded. "Well said." His eyes narrowed as he stared at the 100 or so people in front of him. Then, he said to number 9, "Since you're their captain, then I'm going to send 16 people to infiltrate the 4 major sects. In your opinion, which 16 people should I send?" Hearing this, Fengjiu looked straight ahead and replied in a clear voice, "Master. We are all very outstanding. Anyone who is sent will be able to do the job. We will definitely not disappoint Master. Ha 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 ha. What a good, very outstanding, what a good, anyone can do it. Very good. The black-robed man was very happy. He raised his head and laughed loudly. His happy expression surprised the 4 people behind him. They didn't expect their young master to be so happy because of this. For a moment, the 4 people's gazes fell on the young man named number 9. This young man's answer was also very clever. Just a simple sentence had made the young master so happy. He was indeed a talent. Moreover, not only was he intelligent, but his strength was also extraordinary. He was really a good seedling. The black-robed man stopped laughing and turned to look at the middle-aged man beside him. Pick out 16 people and tell them to infiltrate the 4 major sects as spies and gather information for us. Yes. The middle-aged man responded. He stepped forward and ordered everyone to take off their masks. Then, he picked out 16 younger people and had them step forward. Chapter 1867. I'm here. Fengjiu narrowed her eyes as she replied. From today onwards, you'll be by my side. The black-robed man's voice was casual and there was a hint of amusement in his tone. He seemed to be very satisfied with Fengjiu. Yes. Fengjiu replied. He was slightly surprised. He didn't think that he would be able to get close to the Lord of the Temple of Darkness like this. If he was by his side, it would be much easier to destroy the Temple of Darkness. Moreover, he might be able to get some information that they couldn't find out. Sir, let's go inside and have a rest. The old man walked forward and said. Yes, the black-robed man replied. Then, he turned around and walked forward. The others also followed him. As Fengjiu turned to follow, he gave a look to the more than 100 people behind him. Only then did he leave with them. When they arrived at the place where Elder Ghost had been resting, 2 seductive women came up to them with charming smiles. Unexpectedly, before they could even get close to the black-robed man, they were sent flying with a palm strike. Ah! The 2 flew out and spat out a mouthful of blood. They fell to the ground, their faces pale and on the verge of death. Clean them up. The black-robed man frowned and ordered. He walked in without even looking. Fengjiu, who was walking at the back, naturally became the one to clean up the mess. After ending their lives, she dragged them out and threw them into the beast cage. At this moment, the black-robed man was sitting in the room. He narrowed his eyes and asked the people around him, "What do you think of number 9?" They were startled and looked at each other. They didn't know what their master meant. However, from the previous situation, it seemed that he admired number 9 very much. Thus, one of them said, although he was hit by the heart-eroding pill, his mind is not inflexible. He can also kill people above his level. It's clear that his potential is limitless. That's natural. The person that our master fancies must be outstanding. Another middle-aged man added, number 9 is still young, but he has such a cultivation. If he is trained, he will definitely be a great help to our master in the future. Young master, have some water. The old man did not join in the conversation. Instead, he brought a cup of tea out of nowhere and placed it in front of the black-robed man. At this moment, Fengjiu walked in and bowed respectfully. Master, it's been cleaned up. All right. The black-robed man waved his hand. Number 9 walked up to him and stood quietly beside him. Seeing this, the corners of the black-robed man's mouth curled up slightly. After glancing at him, he no longer looked at him. Instead, he took a sip of tea and asked, I heard that the ghost doctor came here and saved a true monarch from the Huasian sect. Have you found her whereabouts? Hearing this, the expressions of the few people turned serious. After taking a deep breath, one of the middle-aged men carefully said, Master, we have lost contact with the ghost doctor ever since he left the territory of the Huasian sect. Our people have searched everywhere but have not found any clues. Even now, we do not know where he is staying. Another person said, Master, although this subordinate does not have any news about the ghost doctor, there is another piece of news. He paused and said, Tianji Elder's disciple, Nalan Mo Chen, has returned to the clan more than 2 months ago. Recently, there have been 1 or 2 forces developing in the dark. Chapter 1868. Fengjiu listened quietly. He didn't expect the people from the Temple of the Dark Knight to keep an eye on them. 2 powers? Could it be Xianyuan Mo's and the Fengwei's group? Just as he was thinking, he heard the black-robed man's voice again. This ghost doctor called Fengjiu really has some ability. Even after coming here, she can still avoid our eyes. Since she wants to play, then let's play with her. He turned the blood jade ring on his thumb. His eyes were deep, and no one knew what he was thinking. The people behind him looked at each other. One of them stepped forward and said, Master, this subordinate has a portrait of the ghost doctor. Does Master want to see it? Ever since she made a deal with that person to deal with the Phoenix dynasty, Master had only made arrangements for the matters below, and had not even seen the portraits of those people. She reckoned that even if she met Ghost Dr. Fengjiu, he would not be able to recognize her. She's just a woman. What's there to see? The black-robed man said uninterestedly. He waved his hand and signaled to the people behind him, "You guys go out and make arrangements." Yes. The three people behind him left, leaving only the old man and Fengjiu standing there. Seeing the others leave, the old man went forward and set up a chessboard on the table. He sat in front of the black-robed man and began to play chess with him. The two of them occasionally chatted. In addition, the old man called the black-robed man young master instead of a master. It was clear that they didn't have a normal master-servant relationship. After the two of them played a game of chess, the black-robed man called, "Number 9, come and play a game with this sovereign." Hearing this, the old man stood up and retreated to the side to sit quietly. Fengjiu was slightly startled. He said, "Master, this subordinate doesn't know how to play chess. Even if he did, he couldn't play with him. Chess was like a person. If you wanted to understand a person in the shortest amount of time, you could see what kind of person they were in a game of chess. It doesn't matter. This sovereign doesn't expect you to win." He glanced at Fengjiu, "Sit down." His tone was firm and didn't allow for refusal. "Yes." Fengjiu responded. He sat down cross-legged and stared at the black and white chess pieces in front of him. When the black-robed man saw Fengjiu staring at the chess piece in a daze, he couldn't help but sneer. Without saying anything, he picked up the black chess piece and placed it down. When Fengjiu saw this, he picked up a white chess piece and placed it down as well. The black-robed man raised his eyebrows when he saw the two ghost stones that were close to each other. He glanced at the boy before him and picked up a black ghost stone before placing it down. The moment he placed his ghost stone, the boy also picked up a white ghost stone and placed it down. When he saw where the boy placed his ghost stone, he frowned slightly and the corners of his lips twitched. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he didn't open his mouth. Instead, he picked up another chess piece and placed it down. Only then did he withdraw his hand. He saw the young man place another chess piece down without thinking, and this time, he followed his black chess piece. When he saw this opening, his face couldn't help but darken. "You're playing your own game. Why are you following me?" Fengjiu looked up blankly at the black-robed man, whose eyes were filled with anger. He asked in confusion, "Can't we leave like this? Master didn't say anything." "Don't follow me. Play your own game." He suppressed his anger as he picked up another chess piece and placed it down. "Yes." Fengjiu responded. He narrowed his eyes and picked up a white chess piece and placed it at the corner of the chessboard. Chapter 1869. The black-robed man glanced at the chess piece, the corner of his mouth twitching. He continued to play, but after a while, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief when he saw that the white chess piece had trapped him. "You've trapped a lot of your chess pieces. Do you see that? Here." He pointed at the pile of chess pieces that the young man had placed in the corner of the chessboard, blocking the way out. "Isn't this the way to play? Then how should I play?" Fengjiu asked curiously, but he snorted in his heart. It'd be better if he died from anger. Think of a way to trap my black pieces. He took a deep breath and said, "But, what if this subordinate wins?" She asked carefully, as if he would win. "Pfft." The black-robed man sneered, "You? We'll talk about it after you win." As a result, the two of them began to play again. Fengjiu played in a disorderly manner. She placed a piece on the left and a piece on the right. Sometimes she would place her pieces far away, and sometimes she would trap her white pieces. The black-robed man did not speak again. He just endured the whole game. "I've lost," Fengjiu said as he stood up. "You didn't lose, you lost terribly," the black-robed man said, waving his hand to signal for him to step aside. At this moment, the old man next to him chuckled, "Young master, let me play a game with you?" The young man didn't seem to know anything about chess. He didn't play in a systematic manner, and placed his chess piece whenever there was an opening. He was a complete layman. "I'm not playing anymore." He narrowed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "Go and see if they've made the arrangements. If they've made the arrangements, we'll leave. There's no need to wait until tomorrow." "Yes." The old man stood up and walked outside. Fengjiu stood there quietly, not making a sound. After about an hour, the four people outside came in together. After reporting to the black-robed man, the black-robed man stood up and walked outside. She followed behind them. Only when she got out did she realize that other than a few spies who were sent to infiltrate the four major immortal sects, they were going to take the rest away in batches. Fengjiu followed the black-robed man and the old man and left through the teleportation array. There was a flash of light, and when he felt the fluctuations of the array again, he was already standing firmly on the ground. When she arrived here, she discovered that this was actually the back hall of a palace. Moreover, it was a palace built on the side of a mountain. She was slightly surprised. Her eyes glanced around without leaving a trace. Then, she followed behind the black-robed man and walked forward in an orderly manner. This place was very big. Even though she did not see anyone guarding the surroundings, her divine consciousness could still sense that there were many people watching her from the shadows. Moreover, judging from the hidden pressure and aura, they should all be cultivators at the peak of the fairy realm. Among them, there were even a few extremely subtle auras. If she had not been paying close attention, she would not have been able to detect them. Walking forward from the back, the person in front entered the palace, while the old man who was a few steps behind turned around and said, "Number 9. Yes." Fengjiu looked at him. "Since young master asked you to stay by his side, from now on, you will guard him closely. As a shadow guard, you don't have to show yourself unless it's necessary. You will stay by young master's side. If he doesn't order you to, you don't have to show yourself." "Yes," she replied. Chapter 1870. She watched from the shadows as the black-robed man entered the palace and began to deal with the documents and information on the table. Even after entering the palace, he still did not take off his mask. This made her curious. Could it be that the face under the mask was disfigured? Otherwise, why did he not have the habit of taking off his mask in his own territory? In this palace, other than the old man who was waiting at the side, there was only her and the two auras in the shadows. It was a little boring to just stand there. After an unknown period of time, she lowered her head and leaned against the wall in the shadows and fell asleep. At first, no one noticed it. Until the sound of snoring was heard, the black-robed man who was dealing with the documents in the palace and the old man who was waiting at the side were slightly startled. The two of them looked in the direction of the sound at the same time with a trace of astonishment in their eyes. After the old man recovered from his astonishment, he was about to call out Fengjiu when the black-robed man raised his hand to stop him. A trace of interest appeared in the black-robed man's eyes. He stood up and walked softly to the large pillar at the back. Before he got close, he saw that the black-robed youth was facing the large pillar with his forehead pressed against it. Although he was standing straight, there was no doubt that he had fallen asleep. Moreover, he was sleeping very soundly. Faint snoring sounds came from under his mask. Seeing this scene, a sense of novelty appeared in his eyes. No one had ever dared to doze off where he was. Moreover, he was able to sleep while standing. It was simply inconceivable. Because of the novelty, he walked closer. Who knew that at this moment, the youth who was dozing off against the large pillar suddenly raised his head. That pair of dazed and sleepy eyes crashed into his eyes. Master, please forgive me." Fengjiu immediately squatted down with one knee on the ground. At the same time, he narrowed his eyes to hide the flash of annoyance in his eyes. The hall was lit with calming sandalwood, and the fragrance was light and pleasant to the nose. In addition, it was very quiet inside, and she was standing in the dark, leaning against a large pillar. She relaxed for a moment and actually dozed off. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. A dark light flashed in his eyes. He glanced at the youth and said, "Get up. If you follow me closely, you won't even have a room to rest in. Having the ability to sleep while standing is quite convenient." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked outside. The old man glanced at the black-clothed youth and said, "Why aren't you following him?" Hearing this, Fengjiu quickly followed. When she walked out of the palace, she could even feel two sharp gazes sizing her up from behind. In the evening, in a pavilion, there were 8 delicious dishes on a stone table. The black-robed man sat there eating, and there were people holding chopsticks and small plates to serve him food. Seeing this, Fengjiu, who was standing behind him, couldn't help but mutter in his heart. He really knew how to put on an act. However, when she smelled the aroma of the food, she couldn't help but take a deep breath. This was absolutely tempting. Look at the dishes. The rice was spirit rice, the vegetables were spirit vegetables, and the meat was spirit birds. This table full of food was placed in front of her, but she couldn't eat it. It was really a torture. It must be known that ever since she sneaked into the Dark Knight Temple's training ground, she hadn't eaten a good meal. It had already been several months. If they saw her, they would definitely say that she had starved and lost weight. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. She really knew how to make herself suffer. Chapter 1871. Rumble. The sudden rumble caused the black-robed man's hand to pause. He tilted his head slightly to look at the black-robed youth standing upright behind him. "Number 9. Your subordinate is here. Fengjiu took 2 steps forward and came to his side. The black-robed man looked up and saw a mask covering the youth's face. He couldn't see the expression on the youth's face. Thus, he said, take off your mask. You don't have to wear a mask when you're with me in the future. Yes. She took off her mask. Her handsome face was expressionless, without a trace of awkwardness. It was as if the rumbling from her stomach didn't come from her. The black-robed man put down his chopsticks and didn't eat. He just stared at Fengjiu, as if trying to see if there would be any awkwardness on his face. Rumble. Fengjiu pulled a long face and lowered his eyes. He didn't meet the black-robed man's gaze. However, just smelling the fragrance without eating made his stomach growl again. This time, even the person serving the dishes at the side was stunned when he heard this. You're dismissed. The black-robed man indicated for the maidservant to leave. He then glanced at the young man who had narrowed his eyes and said, You, serve me the dishes. Hearing this, Fengjiu's mouth twitched. He braced himself and walked forward. Master, which one do you want to eat? She asked, staring at the food on the table. She felt that all of them were delicious. Anything. As the black-robed man spoke, he raised his wine cup and took a sip of wine. Before he could swallow the wine in his mouth, he saw the young man use his silver chopsticks to pick up every dish and put them into the bowl. In a short while, the bowl was full. Are you feeding pigs? Let's go. Seeing this, Fengjiu moved the bowl in front of him to one side and replaced it with another. This time, he only picked up a piece of crispy bone for him. All right, feed the dog. The black-robed man ate slowly, as if he wasn't picky about food. He ate whatever Fengjiu picked for him, but he ate very little. He only took 2 bites of each dish and didn't want any more. After he finished eating, he walked around. After half an hour, he returned to his bedroom and asked someone to prepare water for his bath. At the same time, he tossed a bottle to Fengjiu. Fengjiu took a look and saw the words, fasting pill, written on it. She sighed. She knew that she couldn't eat meat. She could only fill her stomach with fasting pills. When the black-robed man entered the inner chamber after her bath, she was ordered to guard the outer chamber. As a result, she was unable to step into the inner chamber, let alone take advantage of the night to scout around. There should be many people watching from the shadows in the inner chamber. She was even certain that there should be existences that were stronger than her. The next 2 days were peaceful. Nothing unexpected happened. However, she knew that number 1 and the others had been brought back. However, she had been following the masked man closely. Until now, she hadn't even seen what he looked like. But she knew that there were many strong people here. If she stayed here for a long time, even if she didn't meet with any accident, it was hard to guarantee that the others wouldn't be found out that they weren't poisoned by the heart-eroding pill. She sat on a pillar in the palace and looked down. On another pillar opposite her, there was a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged. That middle-aged man didn't even open his eyes, but his aura was concealed. It was obvious that he wasn't an ordinary strong person. Chapter 1872. This person was heavily protected. Even if they attacked, they would not be able to take his life. Moreover, even if Lei Xiao, Meng San, and the others were here, they could not suddenly attack without a perfect plan. Otherwise, they would suffer great losses. Furthermore, although she had been taken into the black-robed man's side as a personal shadow guard, the person in the dark seemed to still be on guard against her. Occasionally, the gaze that fell on her body would carry a trace of sizing up and probing, causing her to keep her body taut and not dare to relax. Perhaps when she dozed off that day, she gave them the illusion that she was not a threat. After all, she did not appear to be an absolute elite. Instead, she was more like a person of flesh and blood. She felt that it was because of this that the black-robed man had transferred her to his side. A black-robed man walked in from outside. He bowed respectfully and reported, "Master, Han Rong is here." The black-robed man, who was handling affairs at the desk, narrowed his eyes and closed the things in his hands. "Bring him in." At this moment, when Fengjiu, who was sitting on the pillar, heard the report from the person below, her heart couldn't help but move, and a dark light flashed through her eyes. If it weren't for her extraordinary temperament, she would have definitely revealed a flaw at that moment. Han Rong? Was it the same name? It should be. No matter what, that person should not have appeared here. She suppressed the surging emotions in her heart, restrained her aura, and sat quietly on the pillar. Then, she looked towards the entrance of the palace. When she saw a black-clothed man walking in with a middle-aged man, her eyes moved slightly. It was not him. It was not the Han Rong she knew. Well, if it was the Han Rong from back then, when he was expelled from the Crown Prince's residence by Xianyuan Mose, his cultivation would have been destroyed and he would have been seriously injured. It was impossible for him to have survived. She was thinking too much. It was just the same name. However, what she saw next overturned her previous affirmation. "Greetings, Palace Master." Han Rong stepped forward and bowed. Then, he straightened his back and looked at the masked man sitting on the main seat. Even his master did not have a portrait of this person. No one knew what he looked like. It seemed that only the person he trusted the most knew what kind of face he had under the mask. "Why are you here again? What's the matter this time?" The black-robed man narrowed his eyes and asked lazily. "I hope the temple master will not be offended by my sudden visit. However, my master received a piece of news and sent me to the sacred temple." As Han Rong spoke, he saw a trace of impatience in that person's eyes. Without waiting for him to ask, he continued, "My master received news that although the Phoenix dynasty was destroyed and half of the Phoenix guards were killed, half of them were trained by Fengjiu to become strong soldiers. Furthermore, even Fengjiu's grandfather and father did not die." Hearing this, Feng Nine, who was sitting on the top, narrowed her eyes and stared at the people below. Han Rong, who was standing below, seemed to have sensed it. She looked up and naturally noticed the people sitting on the upper seats. His gaze swept past those few people, and he was secretly shocked. There were actually so many experts guarding the palace master. If it wasn't for the glance from above, he probably wouldn't have noticed the existence of these people. Chapter 1873. When he saw the black-robed youth looking down expressionlessly, he looked away and leaned back in his chair. He looked at Han Rong lazily. "Back then, when you used the spirit ore to trade with me to destroy the Phoenix dynasty, you didn't say that we would help you clean up after the matter, nor did you say that we would help you kill the remaining people." Hearing the man's deep and cold voice, Han Rong immediately narrowed his eyes. "I don't dare, I'm only here to tell the palace master the news, I don't dare to ask for the palace master's help." "Humph." The black-robed man snorted coldly and narrowed his sharp eyes. "Han Rong, don't think that I don't know what you're up to. Back then, you were just a servant by Xianyuan Mo's side, but you bullied your master and had your cultivation crippled and chased out. If your current master hadn't helped you take over his body, you wouldn't be able to stand in front of me. Who gave you the right to not kneel in front of me? Who gave you the courage to use me?" That malicious voice was accompanied by a powerful aura, causing Han Rong's heart to jump in shock. The aura of death enveloped him in an instant, causing his legs to go weak and he knelt down. "No, I don't dare. He actually knows. He actually knows that I've taken over his body? He even knows that I was originally Xianyuan Mo's servant? How did he find out?" At this moment, Fengjiu was also shocked when she heard this. She stared at Han Rong, unable to believe that this person was the Han Rong whose cultivation had been crippled by Xianyuan Mo's. "It's him? So it's him. He was the one who had taken revenge and destroyed her Phoenix dynasty, caused so many Phoenix guards to die in battle, caused her grandfather and grandmother to suffer so much, and even caused her little uncle to die because of this calamity." Looking at the person below, murderous intent surged in her heart. She wanted nothing more than to kill him. The black-robed man glanced at Han Rong, who was kneeling before him, and said coldly, "Next time, even if you have such news, you don't have to come and tell me. My Temple of Darkness is not a place where you can come and go whenever you want." "Yes, then I'll take my leave first." Han Rong lowered her head. Perhaps she was afraid of his pressure, but at this moment, she didn't even dare to raise her head. Just like that, she got up and left with her head lowered. It wasn't until she was a distance away from the palace that she let out a light breath. She steadied her rapidly beating heart and quickly left. Only someone like him who had experienced death and despair knew how wonderful it was to be alive. It was precisely because of this that he cherished everything he had now. As for Fengjiu and the others, he would not let them off so easily. Number 9. After Han Rong left, the black-robed man casually called out, "Your subordinate is here." Fengjiu jumped down and bowed respectfully. "You know him?" The black-robed man narrowed his eyes and stared sharply at the youth standing in front of him, not missing a trace of expression that flashed across the youth's face. In reply to Master, "Your subordinate has seen him before," Fengjiu said calmly. "Oh? Is that so? Where did you see him?" He raised his eyebrows, indicating for him to continue. Chapter 1874. The black-robed man didn't ask further. He just quietly glanced at the black-clothed youth in front of him and waved his hand to signal him to leave. Fengjiu didn't return to the pillar this time. Instead, he stood at the back and silently restrained his aura. On this day, other than the people he saw, nothing else happened. It wasn't until evening when the black-robed man brought the old man out of the palace and left Fengjiu behind that she had time to move around. However, although she didn't follow the black-robed man, she didn't leave immediately. After all, there were still many pairs of eyes watching her in the dark. She couldn't afford to be careless. Although she didn't walk around alone for the past 2 days, she had been to many places with the black-robed man and was familiar with the place. At this time, she took the opportunity to relieve herself. After walking for a while, she met the spies who were led away. Because she wasn't wearing a mask, they recognized her when she walked out. When she passed by, Lei Zhao's hand moved slightly and handed the thing hidden in her sleeve to Feng Jiu. She didn't even turn around and continued to walk forward. Feng Jiu moved his hand and threw the thing into the space. He walked away. When she reached a place where there was no one, she opened the thing and saw that it was a map of this place. Could it be that they had already walked out of here? In just 2 days, he had even finished drawing the map? Her heart moved. She took out a pen and paper from the space and wrote down a note. She only had to wait for the right time to hand it to them. After putting away the things, she walked outside and looked around. In another palace, the black-robed man looked at the old man and asked, "What do you think of this number 9? Hearing this, the old man was slightly startled. This wasn't his first time. He couldn't help but ask, "Young master, do you think there's something wrong? I do think it's a little strange. However, since it's someone who took the heart-eroding pill, there shouldn't be any doubt. However, this number 9 gives me a different feeling from the others." The black-robed man said thoughtfully. He couldn't tell what was different. Haha, it said that this number 9 was originally the weakest, but he still had some extraordinary aspects. Take this incident for example. It said that Elder Ghost didn't like him at first, so he released his contracted beast to tear that number 9 apart. Who would have thought that number 9 would actually survive from the jaws of Elder Ghost's contracted beast with a pair of extremely fast legs? The old man smiled. It is precisely because of this that number 9 was left behind. According to our people, he personally watched every spy take the heart-eroding pill. Even if young master has doubts in his heart, the poison of the heart-eroding pill is something that even the people of the 4 great sects may not be able to cure, so that he didn't continue. What he meant was that even if they were suspicious, under the poisonous effect of the heart-eroding pill, even if they harbored disloyalty, they wouldn't be able to do anything. That's right. The black-robed man said. Obviously, he didn't take this matter to heart. He did things according to his heart. If he found the young man interesting, he would tease him. So what if he had ulterior motives? In the palm of his hand, could he turn the sky upside down? However, he didn't expect that his overconfidence at this time would cause him to suffer heavy losses in the near future. Chapter 1875. She came to the center of the spies and glanced at them. She passed the note in her hand to number 1, then walked forward a few steps before stopping. She looked at the middle-aged man in front of her who was giving orders to them. She released her divine sense and sensed that other than a few shadow guards, there were no other strong cultivators watching them. Thus, her gaze swept past the spies. With a glance, she signaled them to move closer to the center. "You all? Just as she spoke, the middle-aged man's eyes widened. His body went limp and fell. However, he didn't fall to the ground. Instead, he was supported by the shadow guard beside him. "Rong-san." She called out. "Yes." Rong-san replied in a low voice. He came to Feng Jiu's side. "Deal with him. You can change his identity so that it's easier for you to do things." Feng Jiu ordered. He passed a bottle of medicine to Rong-san. "Go down to the water source." "Okay." Rong-san replied. He put away the medicine and helped the man leave. Feng Jiu looked at the crowd and said in a low voice, "Everyone, be alert. We'll act by tomorrow night at the latest?" The crowd didn't reply. They nodded and quickly split up. At this time, she turned to leave. She glanced around and noticed that the shadow guards in the distance didn't notice them. Not long after she returned to the palace, the man in the black robe came back. After entering, he looked at number 9 who was in the dark and called out, "Number 9. Your subordinate is here." She walked out with her head slightly lowered. "After I left, have you been here all this time?" He stared at the young man. "Your subordinate didn't. When I went out to relieve myself, I walked around," she said honestly. She believed that even if she didn't say it, he would know where she went. Perhaps because Feng Jiu didn't hide it, he didn't suspect anything. He just nodded and didn't ask any more questions. Until the next evening, a middle-aged man came to the palace with sweat on his forehead. "Master, it's not good. Something happened." "Speak." The person in the main seat glanced at the person below. "Since noon, there have been many problems with people. All of them are unconscious and foaming at the mouth. After checking, they have been poisoned. I'm afraid that someone has snuck in. This subordinate found that someone has poisoned our water source," the middle-aged man said anxiously. His heart was filled with fear as he wiped his sweat from time to time. Hearing this, the man in the black robe frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. This is the main hall of the Dark Knight Temple. How could someone have snuck in? And without a sound? Master, it's bad. The fire is very big, it's out of control. The old man walked in and shouted with a panicked expression. With that, the black-robed man stood up with a swish and walked outside. As soon as he exited the palace, he saw smoke and flames rising from the palace below. Chaotic noises spread through the air as well. Investigate it for me. Who the hell is it? He said in a gloomy voice. Suddenly, as if he thought of something, his eyes narrowed and he looked behind him. The old man saw him looking behind him. He didn't know what he was looking for, so he asked, Master, what's wrong? What are you looking for? Chapter 1876. Where's the young man? His voice rang out as if he was talking to himself. However, when the few people in the dark heard his words, they were suddenly stunned. Only at this moment did they realize that the black-clothed young man had actually disappeared without a trace. Hearing no sound, the man in black narrowed his eyes. Find him. Find him along with the other spies. Yes. This time, the voices of the people hiding in the shadows could be heard. At this moment, the man in black strode out. His feet did not touch the ground as he quickly walked towards the spies. If he still did not know where the problem was, he would have lived in vain. However, he did not expect that the young man would dare to do so. How dare he? He clenched his fist so tightly that his knuckles cracked. The anger in his heart had reached its peak. At this moment, if he saw the young man, he would definitely twist his head off. At this moment, Fengjiu was in the forest behind a palace. This was one of the exits. At this moment, other than the 16 spies who were sent away to infiltrate the 4 major sects, the rest were all present. Is everyone here? Fengjiu looked at the crowd and glanced at their faces that had taken off their masks. Reporting to leader, other than the 16 spies who were sent away earlier, the rest are all present. Lei Xiao reported. Very good. Since everyone is here, leave along the mountain path immediately. After leaving this area, split into 4 groups and leave. Remember what I told you, gather at the designated location within 3 days. Yes. Everyone replied in a low voice. However, they were still a little confused and could not help but ask, Leader, are we leaving just like that? Are we not going to kill them? It's such a pity to let them go. They thought that they could have a good battle here. Who knew that their leader's order was to set fire to the palace and bury those things in the various palaces? They did not know what they were for. Hearing this, Fengjiu smirked. He raised his head and looked at the place where the fire was burning. We don't have to do anything. They will die without a burial place. Boom! 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 Rumble. As if to prove her words, the moment she finished speaking, a loud rumble suddenly rang out. The power of the rumble was not inferior to the power of heavenly thunder. It abruptly rang out in the flames, followed by a series of rumbles. The power of the rumble was so great that it caused the air to tremble. Even the ground began to shake and crack. The people standing here only felt the mountain suddenly shake, and even they couldn't help but sway. After quickly stabilizing their feet, they couldn't help but look at the banging and rumbling sounds in shock, and their faces were filled with disbelief. Enough. Hurry up and leave. I've already broken through the barriers and formations here for you. You can just leave now. Let's go. She gestured for everyone to leave quickly. After all, although she did not choose to face the enemy head-on, after the detonators were placed in the various palaces, this place was considered to be destroyed. Under the power of the detonators, the number of casualties would definitely be considerable. However, it was still impossible to truly injure those powerhouses who did not have medicine. Therefore, he could only ask them to leave as soon as possible so that they wouldn't encounter them head-on and cause unnecessary damage. Chapter 1877. Fengjiu didn't leave immediately. She stood there and waited for Lei Xiao and the others to leave. She didn't leave but turned around. The expression on her face gradually turned cold. Her clear eyes fell on the few figures who were heading towards her. No one knew what she was thinking. At this moment, although the black-robed man who was soaring through the air was wearing a mask, the murderous aura around him was almost soaring to the sky. Other than seeing the Temple of the Dark Knight which had been blown into a mess by the explosion, when he rushed to the Dark Child camp to confirm, he was also thrown into a sorry state by the sudden explosion. Although it didn't hurt him, his black robe was stained with dust and smoke, and several holes were torn by the flying rocks. When he rushed to the Dark Child camp and saw that there wasn't a single spy there, he knew that the resources provided for these 3 months had all gone down the drain. Not only did they go down the drain, They even nurtured those people to become strong cultivators to deal with him. Thinking of this, one could imagine the anger around him. Especially when he saw that black figure standing on the mountain path, his murderous aura soared to the sky. How did they cure the heart-eroding pill? If 1 or 2 people didn't take the heart-eroding pill, it was still acceptable. But it was impossible that more than 100 people didn't take the heart-eroding pill. It must have been cured by someone. Even the people from the 4 major sects couldn't cure the heart-eroding pill, so how did they cure it? In his heart, a person faintly appeared, and that was the ghost Dr. Fengjiu. In this world, who else could cure their heart-eroding pill other than her? Moreover, it was said that the ghost Dr. Fengjiu had come to the upper continent and even cured a true monarch of the Huaxian sect's poison, but then disappeared without a trace. Now that he had seen all this, how could he not think of it? Only, he never thought that this damned ghost Dr. Fengjiu would be so daring, actually daring to sneak in right under his nose. In a few blink of an eye, he arrived a dozen meters in front of the black-clothed youth. Around him, the few people who came with him stopped and naturally surrounded the black-clothed youth. The black-robed man narrowed his sharp eyes and stared at the person who was no longer concealing his aura. The young man no longer had his brows lowered and his eyes narrowed. Between his brows, there was a look of willfulness and confidence. His eyes were cold and deep. The aura around him changed. That aura caused his gaze to involuntarily move. Ghost Dr. Fengjiu. His deep voice was filled with viciousness. It wasn't a question, but an affirmation. His gaze was fixed on the youth in front of him. He watched as the corners of his lips curled up, revealing a devilish and wanton smile. As expected of the Temple Lord of the Dark Knight Temple. You guessed my identity so quickly. Fengjiu's lips curled into a cold smile. At the same time, she moved her hand and an ancient divine sword, Qingfeng, appeared in her hand. When the surrounding people heard their master's words, they were shocked. This young man was actually the ghost Dr. Fengjiu? The few people suppressed the shock in their hearts. Looking at the young man who didn't have a trace of feminine charm, they couldn't believe that such a wanton and ostentatious young man was actually a girl. What a ghost Dr. Fengjiu! What a princess of the Phoenix dynasty! Indeed, seeing once is better than hearing 100 times. He narrowed his eyes and stared at her handsome face. He knew that this wasn't her real face. Chapter 1878. Phoenix Dynasty? Huh? Fengjiu sneered and stared at the black-robed man in front of him. I have no enmity with your Temple of the Dark Knight, and we have nothing to do with each other, but you sent people to destroy my home and kill my family. How dare you mention the Phoenix Dynasty today? Her gaze swept across the people around her, and the corners of her mouth curled up. She said in a cold voice, I'll leave those people to you. Come out. As soon as her voice fell, several rays of light flashed, and then the 3 contracted beasts, Fire Phoenix, Lao Bai, and Tun Yun, appeared from the space. Roar! 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 3 roars came from the 3 beasts, and the powerful pressure in their voices formed 3 waves of air that rippled in the air and attacked the people around them. Tun Yun leaped up, and his majestic body stood behind Fengjiu, facing one of the middle-aged men. Fire Phoenix flapped its wings and hovered in the air, looking down. Lao Bai, although a dragon, was also a mutated beast. At this moment, it was coiled up in a tree and staring at another person. The 3 beasts appeared at the same time, and the pressure of the ancient and sacred beast spread out. The invisible air current was like a mountain pressing down on the chests of the people. They felt a pressure on their heads and chests, and the blood in their bodies was in a mess. Ancient mythical beast Fire Phoenix. Mutated beast Unicorn White Dragon. Sacred beast Tun Yun. When they saw the 3 contracted beasts, they sucked in a breath of cold air, exclaiming in unison. Their hearts were filled with shock as they stared at the 3 contracted beasts, and couldn't help but curse under their breaths. Damn it! How could Fengjiu have so many contracted beasts? Furthermore, they were so powerful. Not to mention that there were 3 in front of them, even one of them would be difficult to deal with. Kill them for me! Fengjiu stared at the people and said. Roar! The 3 contracted beasts responded with a roar, and in the next moment, they directly pounced on those people. The powerful pressure and their own airflow fused with each other, causing their speed to increase in an instant. The moment they rushed forward, the sharp airwaves in front of them also rushed out. When those people saw the 3 contract beasts attacking them, their faces couldn't help but change. They quickly retreated, trying not to fight them head-on to avoid being injured by the other party's powerful pressure. When the black-robed man saw the scene, he couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't expect that Fengjiu could contract so many contracted beasts, and all of them were so powerful. Just as he was thinking, he felt a fierce murderous aura coming towards him. He suddenly came back to his senses and heard a cold voice. Your opponent is me. Fengjiu held a green sword in her hand, and a sharp sword chi shot out when she attacked. It was very frightening. Her speed was extremely fast, and the distance of more than 10 meters was closed in the blink of an eye. Just as the green sword was about to pierce the man's forehead, the masked black-robed man turned around. You overestimate yourself. A malicious voice came out from his mouth. The arrogance in his voice was very obvious. Obviously, he didn't think much of Fengjiu. No matter what, he didn't think that he would lose to a woman. Even if Fengjiu's reputation was very resounding, in his eyes, she was just a woman. Chapter 1879. As soon as she finished speaking, she spun the Qingfeng sword in her hand and a ray of green light shot out, attacking the black-robed man in front of her. The black-robed man did not hesitate. With a move of his hand, a long sword appeared in his hand as well. He injected his spiritual power into the long sword and dissipated the ray of green light. At the same time, the tip of the sword turned and faced Fengjiu. Clang! Whoosh! The two swords collided and produced a clear clang. Two wind blades diffused from the swords, neither giving way to the other. Due to the surge of spiritual power and the spread of pressure, the sand on the ground was swept up and the fallen leaves fluttered in the air. At this moment, Fengjiu did not hide her strength. However, the black-robed man's strength was not inferior to hers. Seeing that the two streams of air were equally matched, she immediately shot out 3 silver needles with her other hand. The black-robed man narrowed his eyes. As he dodged to the side, he heard the sound of the silver needles brushing past his ears. He formed a palm with his left hand and suddenly attacked Fengjiu with a stream of air. When the stream of air attacked, it instantly turned into an ice blade and attacked Fengjiu's face. Seeing this, Fengjiu lifted her leg and kicked. As her opponent retreated to dodge, she waved the Qingfeng sword in front of her. A ray of flame shot out from the Qingfeng sword and instantly melted the ice blade, turning it into steam and disappearing into the air. Seeing that Fengjiu waved her sword and shot out a ray of flame, the black-robed man narrowed his eyes and frowned under his mask. His attribute was ice, but Fengjiu's attribute was fire. Fire countered ice. No matter how fierce his attack was, it would probably be easily resolved by her. Looking at Fengjiu, who was holding the Qingfeng sword, his gaze fell on the Qingfeng sword. If this sword was used well, it could greatly increase one's strength. If it was not for the fact that the sword in his hand was not ordinary, he was afraid that he would not have been able to withstand the attack just now. It seemed that if he wanted to take her down, he would have to end the battle quickly. He did not believe that his contracted beasts would dare to continue fighting after taking her down. Swish! Sword chi shot out, one white and one green. Two streams of chi collided with each other, forming a huge vortex. Two black figures flew up and fought in the vortex. Because they were too fast, they couldn't see the situation inside. They only knew that streams of sword chi shot out from the vortex. When they hit the ground, they made a loud bang and cut a deep trench in the ground. Ah! A blood-curdling scream rang out. They originally thought that it came from Fengjiu and the others, but to their surprise, when they looked in the direction of the sound, they saw a middle-aged man being bitten on the neck by Tun Yun. Blood gushed out as he cried out in pain. Crack! That person did not have time to call for help, nor did he have time to wait for others to come to his senses and save him. His neck was bitten off by Tun Yun. When the sound of bones breaking rang out, that person's head fell to the side powerlessly. Even in death, his eyes were still wide open in fear. Bang! That person was tossed to the side by Tun Yun, and then Tun Yun pounced towards the two people that were attacking Senior White. Ah! A shrill scream tore through the sky. Flames shot out from the fire phoenix's mouth and transformed into a fire dragon that coiled around a middle-aged man. He desperately tried to extinguish the flames on his body. His body rolled on the ground, but the flames burned at an extremely fast speed, and the raging flames instantly swallowed him up. Chapter 1880. Even contracted beasts had different levels of power. Even though the two contracted beasts were divine beasts, under the pressure of a sacred beast and an ancient divine beast, the two battle beasts' legs turned to jelly. They did not dare to fight and only dared to lie on the ground, trembling. When the two cultivators saw this, they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. They had originally wanted to call their two contracted beasts out to help, but who knew that the two savage contracted beasts were like children in front of the ancient divine beast and the sacred beast. They did not even dare to roar. Pang! One of them was suddenly swung by Lao Bai's dragon tail, and was thrown out heavily. Pooh! Spitting out a mouthful of blood, that person spun a few times on the ground. He wanted to stand up, but a flame shot towards him. He was so shocked that he rolled on the ground to avoid it. Who knew that he would be stepped on by the sacred beast who had leaped over? That person groaned, his body curled up and spasmed. He felt as if his internal organs had been trampled by the sacred beast. On the other side, the whirlpool was filled with the smell of fresh blood. The two of them did not stop, and continued to spin with the whirlpool. It was unknown who was injured, until, after a groan, one of them was kicked out of the whirlpool. Pang! Pooh! His body fell heavily to the ground, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The person who fell to the ground was not Fengjiu, but the black-robed man without a doubt. The mask on his face made a cracking sound, as if it was about to split open. His body was also heavily injured, especially the last attack, which had injured his lungs, making it difficult for him to breathe. The whirlpool gradually subsided, and Fengjiu's figure gradually became clearer. Just as she was about to attack again, who knew that the black-robed man stood up and waved his robes, leaving behind a sentence. Fengjiu, we will meet again. As his voice fell, a ray of light flashed, and in the next moment, his entire person disappeared into thin air. Seeing this, Fengjiu frowned slightly. She had actually let him escape. She had thought that she could take him down, but who knew? With a final scream, the person who had lasted until the very end finally turned into ashes and was blown away by the wind. After finishing off all the enemies, the three contracted beasts glanced at each other and stepped forward to Fengjiu's side. Master, I've killed them all. Lao Bai wagged his tail as if he was asking for credit. His eyes narrowed as if he was waiting for Fengjiu's praise. Rumbling sounds came from all around the palace in the distance. It sounded like the rumbling caused by the explosion of air hitting the mountain rocks, but also like the rumbling of the palace collapsing. At this time, Fengjiu only narrowed his eyes and looked up, then said to the three beasts, "Let's go." Yes. The three beasts answered and leaped into the space. After leaving the forest, she went to the place where she had agreed to meet them. About a day later, in a town, have you heard? The Dark Knight Temple's main hall was actually destroyed. A male cultivator lowered his voice and said to the people at the same table. Chapter 1881. What kind of power could be so fierce? They even dared to destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knight Temple? Could it be those demonic cultivators? Who knows? The Dark Knight Temple isn't a righteous person. Maybe they provoked some powerful power and got destroyed. You don't know, but the fire there burned for an entire night. And there's a huge crater on the ground. With that power, I reckon that it was definitely an expert among experts who could leave behind such an attack. However, the news has spread in just a day. Many people have gone to take a look. However, I heard that they can't enter that place anymore. It should be because the enchantments and formations have been reset. I think that the palace master is still alive. The Dark Knight Temple is so powerful. Even if their headquarters were destroyed, it's impossible for them to perish. Moreover, as long as their temple master doesn't die, the Dark Knight Temple's power won't disperse. That's true. But if it was destroyed once, will there be a second time? A second time? Then there's only a chance if someone can enter. In the corner, Fengjiu, dressed in green, was drinking wine and eating meat as if he didn't hear those people. God knows how long she had been craving for it. It wasn't easy to finally be free, so she naturally had to eat her fill first. Waiter, prepare 2 roasted chickens for me to take out. She drank a mouthful of wine and shouted. Okay. The waiter smiled and squinted his eyes. He went to the back to give orders and busied himself at the guest table. Suddenly, the laughter and chatter quieted down. Fengjiu, who was eating in the corner, looked up and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. 4 beautiful women walked in from the outside. The reason why everyone on the first floor fell silent was not only because of their dazzling appearance, but also because of their voluptuous and exquisite figures. Most of the people in the restaurant were male cultivators and some of the wealthier people in the town. Even though they had seen many beauties, they couldn't help but stare. The 4 beauties seemed to have long been used to such gazes. Some of them smiled sweetly at the crowd while others had tender eyes, as if they wanted to say something but were shy. Waiter, give us a private room. One of the women with a seductive smile called out to the waiter, who was staring blankly at them. Fengjiu looked away after a glance and continued to eat her food. These 4 women all had surging spiritual energy. They were indeed cultivators, but they were wearing different colored gauze instead of the sex uniform. Also, these 4 women all had seductive looks on their faces. It was clear that they weren't righteous people. She had met the 2 seductive women from the all-pleasure sect in the training grounds. Their expressions were no different from these people. She reckoned that they might really be seductive women from the all-pleasure sect. I'm Fairy, there are no more private rooms. The 4 private rooms upstairs are all available. Would you like to take a private room on the 2nd floor? Just now, a table of customers left, and there's an empty table. You can also see the scenery of the street. The waiter said, his eyes not daring to look around. How can there be no private rooms? Why don't we go upstairs and ask if there are any guests who are willing to give up their private rooms for the four of us? One of the women smiled sweetly and walked up to the second floor without waiting for the waiter to speak. Chapter 1882. This. The waiter was stunned and looked at the shopkeeper at a loss. The shopkeeper frowned slightly and walked out. He quickly walked up the stairs and stopped the four ladies. Ladies, I'm afraid this is inappropriate. Oh? Why is it inappropriate? We sisters want a better environment to eat. Can't we do that, shopkeeper? If it weren't for the fact that your restaurant is the most famous in the city and that your signature dishes are the best, we wouldn't have come all the way here. The woman at the front spoke in a tender voice. Her voice was soft and gentle, causing the men below to feel their bones melt. Not to mention, the woman's coquettish eyes had a trace of grievance. That kind of coquettish expression that made people feel pity for her made the men below unable to help but open their mouths. Shopkeeper, why are you stopping them? If these ladies want a private room, why don't you just ask someone to make room for them? Let these delicate beauties sit in the main hall and eat. Do you feel good about it? That's right, forget about us. Men eat wherever they go. These girls should have a private room, no matter what. What's more, who knows if the people in the private room will give up the private room to you ladies like us when they see you. The shopkeeper's expression didn't change as he listened to the people below. He only frowned and said to the ladies, Ladies, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's just that the people in these four private rooms can't be offended. I'm doing this for your own good. As he spoke, he paused and thought for a while. How about this? The guests in these four private rooms probably won't be sitting for too long. Why don't you go outside and look around to see if there's anything you want to buy? Come back later. I'll definitely reserve a private room for you. Unexpectedly, while he was talking to the lady, the three people behind him had already walked up. One of them even pushed open one of the doors and walked in. Hey, ladies, you can't. Ah. Before the shopkeeper could finish his words, the woman who had walked in was sent flying out. She screamed as she lost her balance and fell from the second floor to the first floor. Bang! The woman fell onto a table, and the cultivator sitting at the table instantly took a few steps back. His eyes widened in shock as he watched the woman smash the table and throw it to the ground. Pooh! Blood spurted out from her mouth, and her delicate face instantly turned pale. She lay on the ground, unable to stand up even if she wanted to. Seventh junior sister. The other three recovered from their shock. One of them jumped down from the second floor and quickly came to the woman's side to help her up. How are you? Where are you hurt? Who hurt you? At this time, the two women upstairs were filled with anger. Just as they were about to enter the room with the door open, they saw a person walk out. It was a man who looked to be in his 30s. He wore a black robe and had a robust physique. His face was upright and dignified. He walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. His body faintly exuded the imposing manner of a superior. Chapter 1883. The two women's hearts could not help but tremble under his sharp gaze. However, when they thought of their junior sister who was sent flying, they gritted their teeth and drew their swords from their waists. Seeing this, the man frowned. He took a step forward and began to fight with the two on the second floor. The two women were fighting the man with their swords, but the man did not even draw his weapon. Furthermore, he seemed to be dealing with them with ease. It was obvious that the man's strength was far above the two women's. When the shopkeeper saw this, he retreated from the stairs to avoid being affected. He shouted, Hey, the three of you, please stop fighting, stop fighting. Whoosh! The flexible sword shot out a sword aura and slashed through the man's robe. A trace of blood seeped out from the man's arm and dyed his sleeve red. Seeing that they were injured, the man's face darkened. Originally, he did not want to kill them, but now, seeing that the two women were trying to kill him with every step they took, he naturally would not show mercy. You're courting death. A low and cold voice came out of the man's mouth. He moved, and his speed instantly increased. When he charged forward, he grabbed one of the women's wrists and bent her hand downwards. The longsword in her hand fell to the ground. At the same time, he lifted her up and threw her down from the second floor. Ah! The woman who was lifted and thrown to the first floor cried out in alarm. She wanted to stabilize her body as she fell, but she lost her balance and could not turn around. It was also at this moment that the woman who was supporting the injured person on the first floor quickly flew up and caught the woman who was falling to the first floor. Third senior sister. The woman caught the person, but who knew that because of the speed and strength of the man who threw the person down the stairs, she could not stabilize her body. The two of them were pressed down by the invisible force and fell to the ground. The two of them fell to the ground and groaned. Because the force was blocked halfway, although they fell, they were not injured. Third senior sister, take care of seventh junior sister. I'll go help eldest senior sister. As the woman spoke, she helped seventh junior sister up and leaped up to the second floor. When the diners on the first floor saw the fight, they didn't want to get into trouble, so they paid their bills and left early. There were also some who retreated to the door to watch. The only people left on the first floor were the two injured women and the Fengjiu, who was sitting in the corner eating meat and drinking wine. She couldn't be blamed for not noticing her. She was originally sitting in the corner, and now that everyone's attention was on the second floor, naturally no one noticed the corner on the first floor. Fengjiu took a sip of wine and picked up a piece of braised pork ribs to eat. He watched the fight on the second floor as if he was watching a show. That man was obviously hiding his strength. Not to mention the two women, even if the four of them attacked together, they would not be a match for him. Moreover, her gaze fell on the other rooms on the second floor. The doors that were originally closed were unknowingly opened, and there were one or two people standing in front of each door, watching the fight. As for the people in the other wing, they didn't look like ordinary people from the town. From the way they held their swords in their arms, they were cultivators from other places. Could it be that they were here for the destroyed Temple of Darkness? However, at this moment, there was a sudden scream. Chapter 1884. The woman's exclamation was laced with a hint of panic. When he heard the voice, Fengjiu looked towards the woman. When he saw the scene, he could not help but smile. She saw that the woman's dress had somehow fallen down to her waist, revealing her snow-white shoulders and graceful and enchanting back. Her snow-white skin was accentuated by the red doo-doo embroidered with two mandarin ducks playing in the water, making her appear even more alluring and sexy. Her originally ample bosom was wrapped up by the doo-doo and seemed to be on the verge of popping out. Not only was she stunned, even the people who had retreated to the door on the first floor were also stunned. Hiss! Many people sucked in a breath of air, especially when they saw the woman's shy and enchanting expression. Some of the men on the first floor felt a warm current shoot up from their abdomens, straight to their heads, and two streams of blood flowed down their noses. Those people's eyes seemed to be glued to the woman's body, unable to move away for a long time. They could only feel their hearts thumping, somewhat agitated and somewhat excited. Their gazes were fixed on the plump chest, and the thin string tied to the doo-doo, thinking, why isn't the string broken? If the string of the doo-doo were to break, that would be a truly beautiful scene. When the people at the doors of the other three rooms on the second floor saw the woman's exposed spring scenery, an inexplicable smile flashed across their faces. Their gazes swept over her body, from her slender shoulders to her beautiful back, all the way down to her faintly discernible waist and buttocks. Those curved curves made people's hearts burn, like a feather gently tickling their hearts. However, among these people, there was a man who took a few steps back the moment he saw the woman's dress slip. He closed his eyes and looked away, not looking at the spring scenery in front of him. Perhaps, in his eyes, it was not an alluring spring scenery. However, it was precisely because he took a few steps back and looked away that the woman took advantage of the opportunity. In an instant, the woman who had exclaimed lifted her skirt, pulled out a dagger from her thigh, and fiercely stabbed forward. The danger was approaching, and the man's killing intent was closing in. The man gathered strength in his palm and struck out, forcing the woman to take a few steps back. However, at this moment, when the other two women saw the scene, they also flew forward. The three of them surrounded the man, gently pulling his belt, and took off his top to his waist, revealing different colored doo-doo. Yo! Embarrassed to look? One of the women covered her red lips and smiled coquettishly. Looking at the man who was frowning and closing his eyes, she curled her lips disapprovingly. Why are you talking nonsense with him? Kill him. As the other person said this, he directly attacked. When the people on the first floor saw the scene, they could not help but sigh. His luck with women is not bad. This spring scenery is obviously delivered to your door, and you actually closed your eyes and didn't appreciate it. How foolish. The person next to him sneered and glanced at the person next to him. What do you know? Just by looking at that man's strength, cultivation, and clothes, we should know that he is not an ordinary person. Those few women probably won't be able to gain any advantage against him in the end. Of a decent woman. Of a decent woman of a person's of a defeat, maybe he's a disciple of some evil sect. Chapter 1885. Fengjiu, who was in the corner, saw the scene upstairs and could not help but laugh. This was really interesting. However, the man was not stubborn. When he saw the four of them attacking him, he opened his eyes in the next moment and coldly glanced at the three women. His first move was a fatal move. Ah! One of the women was choked by the neck and lifted up by the man. The woman's face turned red as she struggled. Her legs kicked wildly, but she couldn't hurt the man at all. When the two people beside her saw this, they stabbed forward with their soft swords and daggers. However, they didn't expect the man to throw the woman towards them. The soft swords and daggers couldn't stop in time and stabbed into the woman's body. With a muffled groan, the woman's lips trembled slightly. Her eyes were wide open, and her body was twitching slightly. Blood flowed from her mouth. Junior sister. The two of them cried out in alarm. They hugged the woman and watched her take her last breath in their arms. The two of them trembled slightly. Their hands were tightly clenched into fists. Their beautiful faces were full of coldness. They pulled out their swords and daggers and attacked again. Their moves were fiercer than before, and it seemed like they were going to fight to the death. On the first floor, Fengjiu narrowed his eyes and looked at the woman who was standing with her hands on the table. He did not know when the woman had left, and he did not know where she went. Xiao! The sharp sound of the air blade cut through the air, and the man let out a muffled groan. His face darkened as he looked at the arrow stuck in his arm. The arrow seemed to be poisonous, and after he let out a muffled groan, his steps swayed, and his face gradually became ugly. Kill him! The two women shouted and attacked with their swords. However, at this moment, a chopstick shot out from the side room and pierced the hands of the two women who were holding the swords. Ah! The two of them screamed. The daggers and soft swords in their hands fell to the ground. They grabbed their hands and looked at the bloody hole in their palms. Blood flowed out, and their hands trembled in pain. Master, it's here. Hurry! A voice came. The woman who had left came back with a group of 7 or 8 women. The leader was a beautiful woman in her 30s. It's the Hehuan sect. Some of the cultivators on the first floor recognized the woman in the lead. Their faces changed and they quickly retreated. The women of the Hehuan sect were demonesses who specialized in absorbing the essence of men to cultivate. None of them were good people. No wonder. He knew it. How could a decent woman take off her clothes to face an enemy? It turned out that she was a demoness from the Hehuan sect. No wonder she was so shameless. Who dares to hurt my disciple? The beautiful woman's voice was seductive, but it also contained a ruthless aura. As soon as she entered, her seductive eyes stared at the people on the second floor. However, when she saw that one of them had already stopped breathing, her expression changed even more. How dare you kill my disciple? Today, none of you will leave this place alive. The aura of an expert emanated from the seductive woman. That was the pressure of a celestial sage. As soon as the pressure was released, it enveloped the entire inn, causing the faces of those who were weaker to change drastically. The blood and qi in their bodies started to churn, and they felt an impulse to kneel down. So it's Li Meier from the Hehuan sect. Chapter 1886. Master. The two women retreated at this time, their faces full of grievance and resentment. This person killed Junior sister, and the one inside injured us. Master, you must seek justice for your disciples. The beautiful woman did not speak, but stared at the side room on the second floor, watching the old man walk out. When the old man's face came into view, the beautiful woman's pupils shrank, and then she smiled charmingly. I was wondering who it was. So it's you, old fart. Although she was smiling, there was no trace of a smile in her eyes. On the contrary, the coldness and murderous intent were obvious. It was obvious that the two of them had a grudge to begin with. Fengjiu's gaze fell on the old man who walked out at this time. The old man was dressed in a white robe, his white hair was tied up, and the rest was naturally draped over his back. 2 rows of white eyebrows hung down on his rosy and smooth cheeks, and there was a white beard on his chin. He held a white horsetail whisk in his hand, and he looked like an immortal with a kind and benevolent appearance. At first glance, he looked like an old immortal who had attained the Tao. However, the old man did not speak, but when he did, he was the master of infuriating people to death. When Fengjiu heard this, he was immediately amused. Old witch, you're not dead yet, so how can this old man die? How old are you? You dress up all day and run around with a group of little demonesses. Why don't you take a mirror and look at how thick the layer of powder on your face is? You don't find it disgusting, but this old man feels disgusted for you. When the beautiful woman heard this, she trembled with anger. She glared at the old man and scolded angrily, You old fart. You what? This old man's face is smoother and rosier than yours even without powder. What? You want to fight? Huh. When you met this old man a few years ago, I already told you, don't fall into my hands next time. Otherwise, I'll skin you alive. As he spoke, the old man tied the horsetail whisk in his hand to his waist and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was about to fight. Hanyuanzi. You old fart, today, I will tear your mouth apart. Li Meyer was also angered. She had lived for a long time, and because she was a member of the all-pleasure sect, the thing she hated the most was other people mentioning her age. This damned Hunyuan kept calling her an old witch, and he even said something about the thick powder on her face. She really couldn't take it anymore. She had cultivated for so many years. She didn't believe that she wouldn't be a match for this old man even if she was already a celestial sage a few years ago. TSK, I was right, wasn't I? Are you feeling guilty? Are you angry? Look at your character. An old witch is an old witch. You won't be able to accomplish anything great. You better be careful. I will destroy your demon sect sooner or later. Seeing that Li Meyer's face had turned red from anger, the old man leisurely said. However, his words caused Li Meyer's heart to burn with anger. She shouted and pointed her 5 fingers. 5 thin lines shot out from her fingers and attacked the old man standing in front of the door. Step aside. Chapter 1887. However, the man sitting in the corner soon felt that something was wrong. He had taken the antidote, but not only did his body not get better, it seemed to have gotten worse. Especially, his body gradually heated up, his face gradually turned red, and his eyes seemed to become a little blurred. He wasn't someone who hadn't walked outside before. When he saw the condition of his body and saw the seductive and proud smiles of the women downstairs, he knew what was going on. This probably wasn't a poison, but the all-pleasure sex. Fengjiu was watching the old man and Li Meyer fight, so he didn't pay attention to the man sitting in the corner of the second floor. He saw that both of them had the strength of an immortal sage. However, Li Meyer was an intermediate immortal sage while the old man was a peak immortal sage. This way, they could easily suppress Li Meyer's attack. The women downstairs also saw that their master was not a match for the old man. They wanted to go up and help, but because the old man was too strong, they were unable to get close to him. Thus, one of them spoke with a flash in her beautiful eyes. Hunyuanzi, the man behind you can't take it anymore. Do you know what he's been poisoned with? It's not poison, but our all-pleasure sex secret medicine of bliss. Hearing this, Hunyuanzi glared and scolded, it doesn't matter. If he dies, I'll make sure all of you die with him. The woman choked and her words were stuck in her mouth. She could only hold her breath and snort heavily, cursing in her heart, damned old man. He's really hard to deal with. Fengjiu watched as Li Meyer used her 10 fingers to control the silver threads to attack the old man. When the threads slashed through the roof of the restaurant, they left a mark. She controlled the threads with her 10 fingers. The threads looked sharper than blades. 2 of them directly pierced through the roof of the restaurant. Whoosh! Bang bang bang! The old man suddenly pulled out the horsetail whisk from his waist and swung it. A sharp chi blade flew out from the horsetail whisk and attacked Li Meyer. Li Meyer used the silk thread in her hand to block it. The silk thread in her hand snapped and made a few muffled sounds. However, at the same time that she blocked the airflow, she was about to sneer when she saw the old man's horsetail whisk swinging towards her face. Hiss! The horsetail whisk swung directly at her face, causing her to gasp in pain and scream out loud. Her entire body was also swept downstairs by the force of the blow. Master! When the women on the first floor saw this, they were shocked. They hurriedly went forward to catch him, but when they saw him, their faces turned pale. They saw that their master's beautiful face was stained with blood, and they could vaguely see the scars left behind by the horsetail whisk. Such a beautiful and dazzling face was actually ruined just like that, causing them to suck in a breath of air one after another. Let's go! One of them came back to her senses. Seeing that her master was no match for him, she hurriedly supported her and fled. Master Hunyuan, just you wait, I will definitely kill you. Li Meyer's shrill and unresigned voice came from outside and went far into the distance. Tsk. Damned old witch, I'll let you off easy. Chapter 1888. Did you really get poisoned by the Joyful Union sex drug of bliss? That's going to be troublesome. The old man helped the man up. He looked at the man's face, which was flushed red. Large beads of sweat were seeping out, and the veins on the back of his hand were faintly visible. He could not help but hesitate for a moment. Carefully, he suggested, how about this old man find you a brothel? As soon as he finished speaking, the man fiercely glared and gritted his teeth. Help me in. Get someone to prepare cold water. Senior Hun Yuan. At this time, the people from the other 3 rooms also came out. When they saw that the other party was Hun Yuan Zi, they wanted to make friends with him. Therefore, they said, I'm the patriarch of the Su family in Luo City. This time, a doctor from our family accompanied me on this trip. Why don't we let him take a look at this young friend? Hun Yuan Zi glanced at them and saw that the one who spoke was an old man. Beside him was a middle-aged man who wore a healer's badge on his robe. It was a high-grade badge. Seeing this, he glanced at the man and nodded. Then I'll have to trouble you. He helped the man into the room, and the people behind him followed. The shopkeeper looked at the restaurant that was almost destroyed and couldn't help but shake his head and sigh. He went down to clean up. When he reached the first floor, he saw a young man sitting in the corner eating. He saw that the young man didn't seem affected at all. He sat there leisurely eating meat and drinking wine. Even though he had seen many things, he couldn't help but be stunned. This young master? Are you all right? The shopkeeper asked carefully. He looked at the few plates in front of the young man. Many things had been eaten, leaving only a few bones on the table. Could it be that when those people were fighting, this young man was sitting here eating and watching the show? Thinking of this, the shopkeeper's mouth twitched. There were strange people every year, but there seemed to be more this year. The people who came here today were all abnormal. Burp. Not so good. Fengjiu burped and shook his head. Ah? Not so good? Then where are you hurt? When the shopkeeper heard this, he immediately asked nervously. He didn't want to be injured by the chi sword or something. If he was injured here, wouldn't he also be unlucky? No, I'm just a little full. I don't think I can walk anymore. She exhaled softly and rubbed her stomach. She said innocently, I'm full. I suddenly feel like taking a nap. Ah? The shopkeeper looked at the young man in front of him, dumbfounded. Feng Jiu looked at the shopkeeper in front of him and suddenly smiled. He changed the topic. Shopkeeper, I still have 2 roasted chickens that you haven't sent over yet. Are you guys done burning? How much longer do I have to wait? This place started fighting just now. Maybe it's not done yet. Why don't you wait for a while, young master? I'll go take a look. The shopkeeper asked tentatively. Fengjiu's eyes narrowed as he smiled and nodded. All right. When it's done, wrap it up and bring it to me. She stood up, and her dark eyes sneakily landed on the 2nd floor. She wanted to see how the man on the 2nd floor looked like after being poisoned by the drug of bliss. Chapter 1889. At this moment, in the room on the 2nd floor, the old man pulled out the arrow from the man's sleeve. Because the arrow had a hook, there was a piece of flesh. After bandaging the wound, the old man checked the man's pulse. His expression couldn't help but become serious. He took a step back and shook his head. I'm afraid this old man can't do anything. Ah. The man couldn't help but groan. His fists were tightly clenched and blue veins popped out. It was very frightening. Seeing this, Master Hun Yuan also frowned. This can't go on. The cold water is here, the cold water is here. The waiter shouted. He had already prepared a large tub of cold water for them. Seeing this, Master Hun Yuan helped the man into the tub of cold water. He saw that the other people were still around. Only then did he notice that in addition to the old men, there were also a few middle-aged men and 2 or 3 young men and women. You guys go back first. I still have to think of a way. Master Hun Yuan said as he stared at the man sitting in the tub with his eyes closed in distress. Senior Hun Yuan, I'm afraid cold water won't be able to cure the poison. They walked and arrived outside the screen. This all-pleasure sex medicine is extraordinary. If we don't find a way to cure it soon, I'm afraid his meridians will explode and he will die. A way to cure it? Just find a woman to have sex with? No, that brat isn't married yet. He also doesn't have anyone he likes. Just randomly finding someone to cure him definitely won't work. As Master Hun Yuan spoke, he frowned. He didn't think that the all-pleasure sex medicine would be so fierce that it would cause someone with such strong self-control to end up like this. While Hun Yuan was talking to them outside the screen, Feng Jiu was blinking her eyes curiously as she looked at the man who was restraining himself. The most direct way to deal with this kind of drug was to go to a brothel and be fine. She didn't expect that this man would rather endure it than deal with it. Looking at him from such a close distance, he felt that this person's face was quite pleasant to look at. His face was upright and his eyebrows were filled with righteousness. That's right, if he wasn't so righteous, how could he have fallen for the all-pleasure sex woman's plot? Perhaps because Fengjiu's gaze was too direct, the man suddenly opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he directly bumped into a pair of curious eyes that were sizing him up. Their eyes met, one was puzzled while the other was curious. "Who are you?" The sudden voice startled Master Hunyuan, who was outside the screen. At some point in time, he was standing by the wooden tub. Wasn't this young man the one who was watching the show from the corner of the first floor? At that time, he was fighting with Li Meier. Everyone on the first floor had left. Even the shopkeeper and the waiter had gone into hiding. Only this brat was still sitting in the corner, eating meat and drinking wine. He was very calm. It was because of this youth's calmness that he took a second look. However, he was too preoccupied with the person who had been drugged to notice this brat. Who would have thought that this brat would sneak in? When did he sneak in? Why didn't he notice? Chapter 1890. Because Zhuo Junyu had been drugged, even though he was soaking in cold water, his body was still burning hot. At this moment, when the young man's fingers touched his wrist, he only felt a chill pass through his fingers, causing him to involuntarily shiver. A wave of comfort spread through his body. But in the next moment, the finger left his wrist. He looked up and met the young man's teasing gaze. His heart skipped a beat, as if he had been seen through. It made him feel ashamed, and he couldn't help but lower his gaze. "How is it? Can you cure it?" Hunyuan asked when he saw that the youth did not speak for a long time. Perhaps it was because the youth was different from ordinary people, so he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. "Do you have anything valuable?" Fengjiu looked back at Hunyuan and asked. "Ah?" Hunyuan was stunned for a moment, then nodded. "Yes. How can this old man not have anything valuable? He has all the treasures he wants." He turned his gaze and smiled. "So, you can cure it?" "Yes." Fengjiu nodded and extended his hand. He said with a smile, "But I want a reward." "Heh, that's not a problem. Even if you don't like the old man's collection, this kid is quite rich. He can definitely give you one or two things." Hunyuan said, then hurriedly said, "Then hurry up. How do you cure it? Hurry up and don't let him suffer alone." "All right. Those who have nothing to do with it, leave." Fengjiu gestured and glanced at the people at the side. When Hunyuan heard this, he hurriedly turned around and said to everyone, "Everyone, please leave first. Senior Hunyuan, I'm afraid this youth doesn't have the ability to cure the drug. In my opinion, it's better to quickly go to the Alchemist Guild to avoid missing the best opportunity," the elder said. The old man said. He felt that it was impossible for this youth to cure the effects of the medicine. After all, he looked so young. Moreover, the medicine of the Hehuan sect was not so easy to cure. All right, I know what I'm doing. You guys go out first." Hunyuan chased them out and locked the door before walking inside. "Take off your shirt." Fengjiu took out the silver needles and placed them on the table. Zhuo Junyu paused for a moment before taking off his shirt. They were all men, so there was no need to worry about anything. Not to mention just taking off his shirt, even if he took off his pants, it didn't matter. The most important thing was to get rid of the drug in his body. Fengjiu pierced the silver needles into Hun Yuanzi's body. The needles seemed to be placed casually, but each one made Hun Yuanzi, who was watching from the side, feel his heart skip a beat. This was because if there was any deviation in the placement of each needle, it would really be fatal. "Old man, get someone to bring in some ice and add it to the water." Fengjiu did not even raise his head as he instructed. His hands were not idle either. Not long after, more than 10 silver needles were inserted into the man's back. Elder Hunyuan was a little angry when he was called "old man" by a brat. He thought that he was a well-known figure after all. This brat had eyes but did not recognize Mount Tai. How dare he order him around? How dare he order him around? However, for Zhuo Junyue's sake, he only took a deep breath, turned around, and walked out. When he arrived outside, he immediately ordered the waiter to bring in a bucket of ice. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.